since I have to talk to a client soon. So Jeremy is here. It's all my fault. I must have sent him the wrong link. So
No
yeah.
worries. No
How are
worries.
you
I'm
today?
glad it wasn't my computer.
Yeah, yeah. So no baby today.
Not today. He's with his mom. So he's a lot more active now. I don't know if he would stay still like he did last time.
Yeah. How old is he?
Almost a year. He'll be a year April the 7th.
Oh, that's very soon. Yeah. Congratulations. The worst part is over, right? The
Thank you.
most intense period.
It's I've enjoyed it. Part of me, I wonder if the teenage years aren't harder, but
Mhm.
we'll see.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see you. So,
You too.
for people who don't know you, can you tell us what you're doing now with your career?
I represent indigent people charged with a crime in Florida.
Mhm.
And in Florida, we kind of have a two-tiered public defender system. So somebody that would get a public defender, kind of like Corey Richards ended up ultimately getting a public defender from her jurisdiction. But if that attorney had a conflict, like let's say there's two people charged with that murder and one lawyer can't represent them both, in most states, including Utah, they will hire a private attorney and the state will pay them. But in Florida, we have this second tier called the Regional Conflict Council that the state funds. So two people involved in the same crime, one would get the public defender, one would get me through that office. So I've just this year I've tried cases, serious ones like sexual battery, less serious, less significant ones like DUI. Even though it's certainly not saying DUI is not serious, but in comparison to felonies. Um, so that's what I do for now. In the past, I did civil, I did family law, I've done private criminal defense. I was a prosecutor, so I've kind of some people say I can't hold a job. Others just would say I have a broad range of
No,
experience.
you have lots of experience because I've done tons of different types of law also. So sometimes it takes a while to find the right niche. Yeah. And how long were you a prosecutor?
12 years, 7 months, and 10 days.
Okay.
Uh,
Why do you remember it so exactly? Did it have to do with a pension or something?
uh, no, it was kind of like the tale of two cities. It was the best of times, the worst of
Mhm.
times. It's kind of the both, like the ultimate job in some ways, and in some ways it was kind of like you know torture, ulcer inducing, kind of experience. So
Mhm.
um, the best, and you see the best of people, and you see the worst of people, and you also see the
Mhm.
best of bosses and the worst.
Mhm. Yeah. So, what do you think has kept you in this profession for so long? Because it seems like you have had some very stressful times.
I guess masochism, maybe. You know,
Yeah.
also it is interesting. I mean, I'm sure you probably feel this way from your experience. Some of the things that you take to court or work on behalf of clients, it is interesting. It is intellectually stimulating. If you file the civil motion for summary judgment or a family law case that relocation or other things like that, it's technical and it can be interesting. And fundamentally, I think we are attracted to this profession because we want to solve problems. And
Mhm.
I know for me, that's kind of what has kept me going. Um, there's a lot of it, and I talk to some people sometimes that are interested in becoming a lawyer, and I try to say the good and the bad. If you like, if you're a people person and you like um, interacting with people and enjoy that, and if you like writing on the one hand, or if you like courtroom work on the other hand, because some people don't realize that some lawyers never really go in a courtroom, but they
Yeah.
have to, more than likely they have to be a good writer if they're not in the courtroom. um, a lot of it's good. There are huge downsides that's kind of making me want to do something else, honestly. um, Client expectations and management, I think has only gotten worse because they can text you at all hours now, and there's not
Yeah.
a people don't recognize boundaries, and I think um, doctors obviously deal with horrible situations, and there are times when people can get really irate at a doctor in a stressful situation, a cancer diagnosis or something like that. They bear a lot. They bear the brunt of people's emotions, but yet, a doctor or a mechanic gets a certain level of respect. If you say, I want to see the doctor, you wait till when they say you can.
Hmm.
You have a transmission problem on your vehicle, you schedule an appointment, but we don't get that respect as attorneys. And that sometimes is frustrating. It's kind of like, well, you haven't returned my call from 2 days ago, and it's
Hmm.
that part of
Yeah.
it. It's worse now than it used to be. And that's kind of driving me from, a little bit wanting to do something else or reduce hours. Plus, I have a little one. So um, I'm kind of at a point where I don't want to listen to that kind of stuff all the time when I've got my child, you know, in with a babysitter or something like that. I'd rather be a dad first. I'd rather write um,
Hmm.
than that. But it's been an interesting career, and I've got to meet people that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Hmm. Yeah. So hopefully you'll be able to retire and do what you really want to do, which is writing. So, Jeremy, you do have a ton of stories for sale on Amazon, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to finish some more. Here and there. Sometimes I only have 30 minutes a day to write like I want to, but yeah, I've got a book of short stories, hopefully done soon. It's going to
Mhm.
be in one book a novella and 15 short stories, and the title is I didn't get too creative with the title for that. It's just called The Short Stories. So
Mhm.
uh, that's coming. I hope people might enjoy that. But the things I really wanted to do for a very long time, ever since a teenager, would be write crime fiction or military novels. So I've been able to do that. The Chance I'll Take is my first crime novel. Don't Call It Murder is my second, and then I wrote one called Baby Yonatan, which Jonathan with a Y, about the war in the Middle East. So some of that's just my dream as a kid. 12, 13 years old, reading things that, and it was like I really would be cool to do that too. And
Mhm.
it's interesting how things sort of all dovetail together in your life. You read a book like The Murder of Roger Ackroyd or something like that, where it's about poisoning, and that's kind of like early on in the crime fiction genre. And then you see a case like Corey Richards play out, where she's poisoning her husband and stuff, and it's like all these things kind of come in circles, really.
Hmm. Yeah. And people are so intrigued by these criminal cases.
Yeah.
So, whether it's true crime or fiction sort of based on true crime, I think there's a total market for that. So, yeah, thank you, Florida, for the super chat. And thank you, Mary, for joining as a member. So, appreciate that. Yeah. So, these are some of Jeremy's books you can find on Amazon. How many books have you published so far?
Three novels
Oh, okay.
and one novella. So I think that one's maybe about 100 something pages, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, Drone Land is the novella. Um, and then short stories, I think I've published about 14 or 15 so far,
Wow, that's
and three
impressive. Yeah.
three children's stories. Thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed it, and it's just stuff that I'm interested in, or you know, some of them some of them I'd get the idea in the morning just drinking a cup of coffee, and I'll say, "Hey, that would be cool to write about." And, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 hours, I'd have something finished. Now the novel, like Don't Call It Murder, I worked
Mhm.
on that off and on for 10 years because, I just would write different drafts of it. I wouldn't be satisfied with it. I had to do a ton of research because it's set in the 1930s in, a very small part of our state in Florida, in Apalachicola. So, the research was difficult because there's not a lot of source material from that time period. I was trying to write a crime novel based in that period of time.
Mhm. Yeah.
But life imitates art. That's kind of what makes it interesting because you have some novels written about poisoning, then you have a true crime case like um, Corey Richards. You have things like I wrote my first novel in 2014, and a lot of the themes I explored, I kind of then saw play out in real time with the Sims murder in Tallahassee, where the authorities didn't want to touch it, and there was politics involved, and the person looking into the case was just kind of ostracized and almost lost the career and stuff like that. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
life imitates art is what's really interesting about some of the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think we mentioned this, but you're located in what, Northwest Florida, right? Near
Northwest
Tallahassee?
Florida, the
Yes.
west of Tallahassee, so the Panhandle. If
Mhm.
people, the part that some people driving through the state to get to Disney World are going to go through and not
Yeah.
stop. Um,
Yeah. What was it that Wendy said? It was just like a short little stop on the way to civilization
yeah,
when she was
yeah,
making fun of Hiawassee Springs. Yeah.
I'll tell you, it is a culture shock if you're from a larger city. If somebody's from Miami or from you know Raleigh or DC
New
or New York
York.
or anywhere else.
Yeah.
Tallahassee itself, you think of that's the capital of the state. They got two significant universities there, but on a Saturday night, it's completely dead downtown. Um,
Mhm.
at least when I was living there, and for some people, that's quite a shock. Now, others think, well, that's a quieter place to raise a family and have kids, and
Mhm.
things like that. So it depends on one's perspective. Um, I liked working there. I thought it was interesting because you did have the colleges there, and as a prosecutor, you always had interesting cases stemming from some of that, and it's a significant enough city that there are interesting cases there, but it's still a very small town.
Mhm.
Come right down to it, a population about 300 something thousand people.
Yeah, that's the feeling I got when I was there for Donna's trial last year, because even say like after 5 p.m., I'd be walking from the courthouse back to the hotel, and it was like there's nobody in the streets. It was like totally dead.
Yeah.
There might be like one expensive restaurant here, but there's no lively hustle and bustle. It was very quiet. Yeah.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And now I live in a place where there's not even. I was joking with a friend of mine. It's like the nearest Burger King is probably 30 miles from the town I
What?
live in. You know,
Well, how did you wind up there then? Why are you living out there?
my wife's family is from this area, and
Mhm,
so I was practicing law, had my own firm in the next town over
mhm,
from where my wife grew up, and so we were one town away from each other and met. And the town I lived in, Chipley, was very, very tiny. Kind of what drew me to go there and practice is they had 3 or 4 practicing attorneys in town, so there was significant work available,
mhm,
and it was good. I mean, it was good to me, good place to practice. And I did that. I had my own firm for about 3 years,
mhm,
and then I joined a private defense firm that's statewide. Um, there are definitely downsides to having your own office and having all the expenses and having all the marketing and all that stuff.
Yeah. Don't hide and know it, but somehow I'm still doing it after 20 years. So it worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you just have to get good clients, though. It's tough when there's competition. Yeah. Well, maybe we should talk about this whole Dan Markel case first, because that's how people know you. And most of the subscribers are still so riveted by this case because Wendy hasn't been arrested. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Do you think she's going free?
Well, and I'll be the first to eat some crow here, because I was saying last year I thought maybe they'd have an arrest around Christmas time or
Yeah.
before the new year. So
Mhm.
I have to acknowledge that. I don't know. Some people are saying they want to wait till Charlie's and Donna's appeals are fully exhausted before they go forward.
Mhm.
And that could be an issue. There's another podcaster that did a segment here recently, and I'll get the order of her title wrong, but it's True Crime Bar Lounge, I think, is
Oh, Lounge Bar Crime, I think.
Lounge Bar
Yeah, she's
Crime.
from the UK.
And I enjoy listening to her programs. And she was asking, kind of why, and I responded on one of the comments saying, just Tallahassee's a really small town, a very small prosecutor's office. So I mean, if somebody's used to the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK, like in Manchester, or I'm not sure, I think she's probably from Northern England, big cities with big offices, or just in the US, Miami-Dade County, there's probably 250 prosecutors for the community. But Jack Campbell has maybe 39 attorneys working for him. So their time to get something up to speed is probably, that one case takes up a huge amount of their time and attention. They tried a cold case here recently from 1976 to verdict, and it was, it was not guilty, but it was a tough case. So I don't, and I say all that to say is I don't know that it's permanently not going to happen. I just think they probably have had their plate full. I certainly think they ought to put everything they can into this case to Wendy's prosecution. Now, if they, in good faith, look at it and think they can't prove this to a jury, you really, as a prosecutor, you need to look at it more so than just probable cause to arrest her. I mean, because they could have that and still not have a good case. They could have probable cause and not have anything but a flop of a case. I think they have a lot more than that. I think they have something, to me, is beyond a reasonable doubt. But they know the facts better than I do, and there are certain facts that have probably been held back. And if you and I were on the jury, we'd probably see some things in the trial that we don't know about right now. So I don't think it's not going to happen, but I am kind of puzzled why we're going into March, April on it. You run into issues. Witnesses could pass away. Witnesses could, meet an accident.
Memory problems. Yeah.
Yeah, and move away. Do you want to have something where you're starting to have to fly in, ISOM from Hawaii, or anybody that retires and moves and travels and that sort of thing.
Did you watch the oral arguments in Charlie's appeal?
I did not. That's something I wish I'd had a chance to do.
Yeah, I watched it, but that was on Deep Dive True Crime, and it was actually very brief. I think each side had 20 minutes or something. So, Professor Patuto didn't think he had very strong arguments, but Of course, people keep mentioning this whole conflict of interest that Rashbaum had, but that would be something raised on a much later motion for post-conviction relief, right? So that's not part of the appeal.
Yeah, I would think that would be something in a later motion for ineffective assistance of counsel. And I don't see that as really being a good appellate issue. And overall, they just don't have a lot to work with. I mean, they got a fair trial. They had a
they
pretty
found
savvy
the jury. Yeah, they seated the jury. So,
pretty savvy judge that really kept things toward the center, I think. I can't think of any arguments that were really outlandish, and then you think about in Donna's trial, the defense was trying to say that the court sort of indicated a preference for one side or the other in behavior toward defense counsel, and I just don't see that. And I don't really see either one have a slam dunk issue on appeal. The district court that they're in, a lot of times they just do a pure curiam affirmed. That's about the extent of a lot of these decisions that get appealed after trial.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I thought they had to have some sort of big written opinion. Yeah. So, what about this? Do you have any idea when there's going to be a decision?
I really don't. It can take some time. With an appeal,
Like a year, maybe half a year.
Easily 6 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's just sitting there, and I don't think I asked you this before, but Sigfredo's motion for post-conviction relief must have been filed at least 2 years ago. Of course, I think he got some young attorney to help him, but it seemed like he was trying to draft it himself first or something. So why is it that it takes so long? I mean, is there some sort of procedure for this?
It's been a while since I've done
Post-conviction.
I had to do it at the state because I'd have to respond as a prosecutor when the defendant raised one and we had a hearing. But then I represented somebody privately and wrote a ineffective assistance of counsel claim for him. But you have a pretty broad window of time. It's not forever though, but you do have a pretty broad window, and it's after the appeal and so forth are finalized. I don't remember the exact amount of time that you have, but it's fairly generous. And I think in my case, there was even an ability. This I think I had a second. This was the second 3.850 is the rule that we use, but it was the second ineffective assistance claim that this particular client filed. And so you're allowed a couple bites at the apple on those. Whereas on an appeal, you most of the time have one shot at an appeal to the next higher court, in district court. And then some people in rare instances can carry a case to the state Supreme Court or U.S. Supreme Court. But, I don't know there's really much in these cases of an issue that's going to go that far, although, it's certainly theoretically possible it could.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you probably didn't hear about this, but there was some sort of continuing legal ed class where Georgia Kappelman spoke about the whole Dan Markel case. And I contacted the Bar Association to see if we could get a recording of it. And they told me it's going to be available for purchase in a couple of weeks. So I'm like, oh, so if they're going to charge CLE prices, that'll probably be what, like $300? $300, $400, do you think?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
Wow.
anywhere from like 150 up to that amount. Sure. That's
Yeah.
interesting though. I didn't realize she was doing that.
Yeah. So this was on March 3rd at the Country Club for a powerful CLE panel discussion on the Markel case, high in demand. It was Georgia Kappelman, Newland, juror Marion Kittrell, modified by Judge Sheffield. So, are you familiar with Judge Sheffield?
I am. He used to, for a long time, was a prominent defense attorney in the area. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's interesting, really. And think about, it's rare for somebody, a prosecutor of a case like this, to speak publicly in any venue. So that's interesting. Something that you don't often see, and especially in the area of our state. I think other prosecutors are probably more in the public viewing. The prosecutor from down in Palm Beach,
Oh, Dave?
Mr. Ehrenberg,
Yeah, Dave
had,
Ehrenberg.
had podcasts and stuff like that, which is great, because I enjoyed listening to some of his insight, because more commonly in Florida, you just don't get people that are elected state attorney out there really discussing things like that. And certainly Jack Campbell doesn't really give a lot of interviews or public talks that are like this. And I think probably that's true of most state attorneys. They'll do campaign stuff, but they're not going to sit down for a long interview or do a CLE. So I think it's kind of exciting that she's doing that.
But on the other hand, is this a bad sign that maybe the prosecutions are over, so that's why they're coming to speak about the case?
Well, some people were saying that when Craig Isom did interviews.
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably heard that too. Some people were thinking, well, does that mean this is over because he's out there talking about it? And a lot of times you don't want to talk about something if you're going to have to be in trial again, and then that's another thing that the defense attorneys can use to cross-examine you. They could go get Craig Isom's interview, and that's food for fodder the next time they cross-examine him. Same thing with Georgia. I'm sure will pick through everything she says. But I don't know. I don't know if you could read anything in that. She may be of a mind to be done with the case and pass it off to somebody else. Maybe that's a reason why this is being delayed. All of that is purely speculative. I don't have any more insight than anybody else on that, but that could be a reason. The other thing is, it's kind of like all this is out there. It certainly doesn't hurt anything for her to talk about it. Hard to say. I think that if we get into the summer or the autumn and still no arrest has been made, I will start to feel more ill at ease about the situation. Because at a certain point, if you go into late 2026, early 2027, I mean, you've got something 13, 14 years old then, 13 years old. And I don't know. I think the chances of it start going down after that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just frustrating for most avid followers of this case. Could the delay in charging her be due to changes going on in the prosecutor's office? Because we heard that Georgia had changed positions or something.
It kind of dovetails with what I was just saying. If she plans on a different role and maybe turning this over to somebody else. And you think about it, she's tried, what has it been, 4 trials on this one episode.
Yeah.
It may be time to pass the torch to somebody else. And and I'm not saying that in any way to be disparaging or to be presumptuous. I'm just saying normal, you know, common sense that, maybe it's time she wants to do something else, or there are other prosecutors, and, none of us are indispensable. If, um, there's other people that can try this case, and it may actually be a good strategy to have somebody new come on it. If you're going to run this trial, they know who the defense attorney more than likely could be, Mr. Loro. So do you want to give him a playbook of what's been done all these times, and then he's going to, think he's ready to meet that? Instead, you throw in somebody new and a new team. I don't know. This is just kind of thinking realistically, what may they be thinking about? They don't have an election until 2028. So, how does that factor in? And you have to kind of look at some of that too. I have to give some credit to Jack for, letting it go forward with Charlie and Donna. Those were tough cases. And I think it's great that they did that. That was kind of what I had been trying to speak about back in 2016 and 2019 in that era, just to say, it needs to go forward against the ones that, not just the ones that actually physically pulled the trigger, but the ones that built the gun and actually
who paid for it.
caused that trigger to be pulled. And then I think he did great here recently going forward on a cold case from, 50 years ago. I have to give him credit for that.
Yeah.
But I kind of, butted heads with him because 10 years ago, his opinion about cold cases was, we can't work the ones we have. So we don't have the resources to go back on these other ones. And, if my daddy couldn't solve a case, nobody could solve it. And I was like, well, that's, this is not about a person. This is about a victim. And however we get justice for that victim, that's what it should be about. I think he probably faced some heat for not going forward further, but I don't know how that factors in going into 2028 if he's going to run again, if he feels like he needs to do more on the Markel case to keep up in the eye of the public, what the public expects, because I think there was public pressure to go forward on this from around the world, and I think even the most secure or jaded politician is going to feel that, and I think he felt it. I don't know what that means in 2028, and he may be able to take the position coming into that we pretty much got everybody involved in this to the ability that we could. We got the shooter, the driver, the middle woman, mama, and brother-in-law, and we just don't have it on the next. And maybe that's not really an issue that's going to keep him from getting reelected. And I hope it doesn't come down to just that crass type of calculation, but we're talking about somebody that has to get reelected,
Okay, interesting. Well, you mentioned John Lauro. Does he have a reputation for doing criminal defense trials and murder trials, though?
I don't,
as far as you know. Yeah.
I don't really know a lot about him. I mean, I think he's well known for representing the president in certain matters, in addition to Wendy. So he's got Wendy as one client, and he's got President Trump as a client in the recent past. So high profile type of attorney, but in terms of actual down and dirty state trial experience, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a question. If Charlie or Donna did get a new trial, they could use Wendy's arrest as pressure for her to testify with offering her a deal.
I think I see where they're going, and I think
well, I mean, I guess I don't know. I kind of feel like none of them are going to rat on each other. Maybe Charlie would once his parents die, but they're so enmeshed and they've stuck to their story this whole time that they had nothing to do with Dan Markel's death. And it was Katie, or, well, actually, during Donna's trial, her attorney did seem to sort of cast some aspersions onto Charlie as if, hey, we don't know what he did, you know, but I don't see them turning on each other. They've been very tightly knit throughout this whole process.
I agree with you, and I'm not sure maybe what the writer is getting at. If they arrest Wendy, and then they're going to have to retry one of Donna or Charlie, then at that point, Wendy would have an incentive to flip, and the state may have a reason to offer her something because they could use her testimony for a new trial. I kind of see where they're going there, but I agree with you. I think if they had flipped, if they're going to, it would have happened by now. I think they insulated Wendy enough so she had enough plausible deniability that she's not going to panic. She's not going to panic and go run to law enforcement and say, "Here, can I work out a deal?"
Mm.
So I think that would be very, very unlikely for that to happen. And I think one of the reasons why we're here, 12 years on and talking about 13 years, 14, I think if they had charged everybody from the onset, they probably would have flipped the right person that I think most prosecutors looking at this case would have wanted to flip Katie and use her to testify against Garcia and Rivera, put them away, put away Charlie, Donna, whomever else that they could prove a case against. And you'd have this thing wrapped up in 3 or 4 years instead of here we are over a decade and approaching.
But she didn't flip. She said because first she couldn't testify against Sigfredo, the father of her children, and he was facing the death penalty. So that's why she kept her mouth shut. And I think she was just too confident, I think. And her attorneys believed her. So she just stuck to her story.
Well, you have a number of layers there, but I think part of the reason she held out was because Charlie and Donna were not affected. And I think she had tacit understanding, or maybe more concrete understanding, that they were going to stand by her if she didn't turn on them. Mm-hmm. But if you arrest them all in the beginning, they're all sitting in a jail cell. She doesn't have that to rely on anymore. Who's going to take care of her kids? Who's going to pay for her legal bills when Charlie and Donna are sitting in a jail cell down the hall? I think that was the best shot that the state had of getting the right person to flip, instead of the person that may have even been the shooter for all they knew in the beginning when they sat down and talked to Mr. Rivera. And it turns out he's the one driving the hitman. After Garcia does the shooting, Rivera doesn't leave him and say, "I don't want any more part of this." He drives them away. They flee together. So that's not the person ordinarily you'd want to flip as your witness. But by that point, there's no chance that Katie was, because of a lot of those factors. But mainly, I think, because Charlie and Donna were still out and they still had the millions of dollars that, she could see come to her at some point, or to her kids at some point. And, we never in the public view got a real answer to who paid her legal bills. And there are certain legal protections why that's not going to be made known. But, one attorney is down the hall from the other attorney. Could money have come from the Adelsons into the Katie Magbanua Defense Fund? I mean,
yeah, through her brother or someone. Although both Katie and her brother denied that. they claimed I think the brother did say that the Adelsons offered to pay for her legal expenses, but they said no. And Kawas was saying that it was the family who scraped together to pay for the legal bills. So who knows what the truth is? And there could have been some life insurance from Katie's mom who passed away. Sorry for my voice as usual, but feel free to talk more because I think I talked too much yesterday. I shouldn't do 2 live streams in 2 consecutive days.
Those are good. Those are good points, though. And, at some level, you kind of have to take certain things that give the benefit of the doubt to people who are practicing law. It's easy to kind of throw stones and say something shady happened. Those attorneys may be completely innocent. Family brought them the funds to represent a client, and we all are in positions sometimes where we're paid to represent a client. We're not really paid to hire a forensic accountant to go after our own client. And each of us, I think, has a different threshold of what may be ethical. If a mother of a client comes to me and pays the legal fee, if I have no reason to think it comes from any kind of criminal source, I'm not going to ask them for receipts who actually took money out of
where'd that come from? Yeah.
But I think in this case, in terms of we're kind of doing a journalism role here. It's kind of like in that movie JFK, Oliver Stone, where they bring out the anti-Castro guy. His office is here, and then if you actually walk it, it's the same building, but it's just one door over. The pro-Castro guy, his office is there, and it's like a CIA front and stuff like that. Here you have one lawyer in one hall of the building, and then down the hall you've got the other. You've got a person that would ordinarily be the one that would flip. She has the most at stake and the most reason why the state would give her a deal. She was not the triggered person. She has kids. She's a mother. Mm-hmm. But yet she holds out really against all odds. And it's just kind of hard to believe that somehow money didn't come from the Adelsons to
the rich family, because she and Sigfredo were broke. So, yeah. Well, there was just some question I wanted to ask you. So I remember seeing some sort of filing by Tara Kawas, maybe when she was representing Katie, and it mentioned something about how she was getting paid $15,000 for something, not the whole trial, of course, but it seemed very low to me. So would there be times that you've seen some attorneys be willing to take a very low fee because they could get some sort of publicity for a case?
Oh, sure. The publicity, some would do it for altruistic motives. They feel like this person really has a right to and a good representation. And that may well be what Ms. Kwas's motivation was, and her co-counsel, I can't remember his name.
Oh, Christopher DeCoste.
And I'm sure some people, I'll probably get some hate mail for saying it, but they may have done this purely for wanting to help somebody that couldn't afford it. I don't know. I don't know them personally. There was an attorney that on the Sarah Boone case, if you remember that one, the guy in the suitcase, she went through multiple attorneys and she ultimately takes out this ad for an attorney. Mm-hmm. And the former public defender from Santa Rosa County in Florida, way over on the far end of the panhandle from me, he took the case and he pretty much knew, I would have to assume that he was not going to really get paid anything for doing this, but he felt like it was so important that she have counsel. And she had made a public appeal for counsel, and pretty much she exhausted all of her attorneys. Nobody would really work with her. And so he felt that she deserved somebody stepping forward. So he did that. And to me, that was very honorable. I've met him before. I think he really embodies, that spirit. He just wanted to make sure she had counsel.
Oh,
Her
that's great.
promises to pay. I mean, she got a significant sentence. I don't think she's ever going to pay anything, but so I don't know what happened really in this case, but it's, to me, it's just kind of like, you have to look at things. What has a ring of truth and what has common sense, and why did she hold out so long? You know, could it be explained by, there's a pot of money somehow here that's going to, you know, one way or another, it's going to work its way over here to you guys and
Mm-hmm.
to the
Yeah.
family. And then, you know, the family paid this. And because most families don't have 150, 200, $250,000 they can kind of just, you know, scrape
Yeah,
up.
spent on 3 lawyers from South Florida going up to Tallahassee for a 2-week trial or something. Yeah. Well,
some of that we may never know. It's kind of like some things we may never know about the judge that Wendy worked for that made a phone call or two on her behalf. You know, we'll
mhm.
probably never know the answer to that. And, you know, that judge, she may have taken advantage of him in the sense of, you know,
Yeah, acting like,
right.
I don't know what's going on, and you know this person in Tallahassee, can you find out for me what's
Yeah.
happening with this whole investigation, you know? But of course, you know, from what I heard, she never checked up later directly with the prosecutors and investigators to see what the status of the whole Dan Markel investigation was.
She's kind of like O.J. Simpson out there for years trying to
Yeah,
find the real
working
killers.
hard.
You know?
Yeah, find those real killers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she did put a lot of work into that, and I think we know the supposition is that you know, she knew pretty much what was going on. You know,
Yeah, at the
it
very
wasn't a
least.
mystery.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's another question. Thank you, Eric Norgard. Is it possible the Markels could be persuading the prosecution to delay for the kids' sake, since they would be losing both parents?
You know, I wonder about that. I think that potentially could be an issue. And I think we were talking about this before Donna's trial, and it may have been on Surviving the Survivor. I think Tim Jansen thought, Tim Jansen, somebody I have a lot of respect for, very prominent in the area, he thought really there's no way prosecutors would factor that in. You know, you if you have the evidence, you go forward or not. But I kind of wonder, you know, that they might not think about that, because yeah, you would see these kids lose their dad, you know, lose grandparents that for whatever we think of them, they were there with those kids, and now those kids don't have, you know, their grandmother, their uncle, you know, and now you can take their mom away from them. And what does that do to them? You could look at it that way. There's no statute of limitations on this. They turn 18, they're on to college, they're on to careers and things of their own, but they're not, you know, put into foster care. They're not even because to me, even temporarily, that's kind of a significant, you know, thing to a child, to even a teenager. Their mom gets arrested. Do they have to go into foster care in Colorado or Texas, wherever she is, until the Markels can come get them? And
Yeah.
it's unfair that the Markels and they aren't as close as they by rights ought to be. But yet again, you have to think of those kids. You're putting them with people that they don't know as well. And, you know, it's kind of like if you think of a relative of yours that you, let's say you've seen them 6 times between the time you're 8 and 15. And now they say, well, Judy, you're going to go live with that person now. I would
and have to move, you know, when you're in high school about to graduate, that would
change
be a
schools.
big stressor. Yes.
So I don't entirely dismiss that notion in there. And of course, obviously, you got to be really tough as a prosecutor. You can't really just be sentimental and say, I'm not going to charge this person because the kids, but they could be factoring that in, and that could be something they're doing in conjunction with the Markels that they're not talking about publicly, and for good reason. I totally respect if that's not something that's being discussed publicly. But what is the best for the kids? What's in their best interest?
Mhm.
And that, to me, that's something I would kind of agonize over if I was in Jack Campbell's chair right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I see. Okay. And True Crime Wifey, I think you sort of addressed this, but how would it affect moving forward if Sarah Catherine Dugan became a judge?
I think it would be she's a tremendous part of the case. Um, but there are others that can step up and do the job. There are, like I say, 40 other people in the office. So they can try the case. She at one point took over from Anna Norris. So, I mean,
Yeah.
no one person's indispensable to this. And, any number of good attorneys in the area could prosecute this case. So I wouldn't be worried about that. But could that be something that they're thinking about? And think about the tiny office that this is. They have a staff meeting, maybe 8 top prosecutors are in the room with Jack Campbell, and they might be thinking about that. Let's wait and see if Sarah Catherine gets this, because we're going to have to put somebody new. They're going to have to get up to speed, and that's totally reasonable to think that through, because the office is that small. A bigger office, you might have more attorneys on a murder case like this. You might have a couple backup people that could just plug right in, and that may not be a consideration of this kind. But here in this office, we're talking about circuit wide, and I should say that as well. There are 6 counties in the Second Circuit, 40 prosecutors for those 6 counties. And like I say, Miami-Dade County, there's like 250 for just that one.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. This is True Crime Wifey. Please subscribe to her channel. Also, even if Wendy is arrested, she still has parental rights. She 100% has a plan in place to where the boys will go. Yeah. And some people have said there are rumors that maybe she's already named her boyfriend, her live-in partner, as the potential guardian for the kids, and that supposedly the kids' last names have been changed to his last name, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, she's not adverse to changing their names, so
Yeah, she even smiled about that. She said, maybe we'll all change our names or something like that. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Um, okay, well, let's kind of move on to Afroman, because while I have
okay.
you here, there's actually been a bunch of newer cases in the news that people have been totally into. And one of those cases was the whole Afroman civil trial. And I'm not sure how much of the reading and watching you've been doing, but were you surprised to hear about these allegations against the police officers going to, bash in his door and, knock over his gate and flip through all his stuff, and it turned out to be groundless?
I'm not too shocked by it. I think we're in a climate where people are probably going to get a spotlight if something like that happens. And, we've seen other cases where, true or not true, law enforcement's in a search or a situation where somebody gets shot in the crossfire or killed. And there have been cases where they went to the wrong address and things have happened. And, so people are not adverse of going public with what they perceive as a problem. There's cameras are ubiquitous, so we have videos of everything. So
Mhm.
in the day and time that we're in, I'm not surprised, and he had cameras in his home. So we have video. And we also in an age where something goes sideways, there's all kinds of body cam video from officers. So it's content, it's fodder for media attention or suits that a decade or two in the past wouldn't have gone forward. We're in a litigious society, so these officers bringing the suit, it was just kind of the climate we're in. I think had they not brought the suit forward, they're probably wishing they hadn't done that at this point. But I'm not really surprised by it. I think we'll probably see more of that. It's kind of like jurors speaking out in cases now. I think once we started seeing that in the Markel case and others, we're seeing it now in the Richens trial as well. I've seen at least one or two jurors that have come out and talked about their trial experience, where 10, 20 years ago, you'd never see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of their channel, but Bob and Ali Mata have a true crime channel. And they recently did an interview of one of the jurors in the whole Afroman trial. So that's pretty cool that people now have this forum to, tell people more about their experiences being on a trial. So just for fun, we're going to show a tiny bit of Loophole Lawyers video from yesterday about the case, because
Okay.
I just find this case so riveting, because it's actually pretty hilarious, don't you think? Have you watched some of the videos?
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's fascinating. It's kind of, in a way, it's kind of unseemly in a sense. It's kind of just like some of the stuff you see on TikTok or things like that. It's just kind of, in a way, it's kind of like you turn it on and you can't turn it off, even though it's, mind, destroying maybe. But it's interesting on a whole other level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, it's bizarre, because first you think it's a criminal case, but then you realize, wait a second, he made some musical parody videos making fun of these sheriff's deputies who broke into his house and tore down his door and gate and rifled through all his stuff. And he alleged that they also stole some of his cash.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, they didn't find drugs or any sort of kidnapping victims stowed away in a dungeon in his house. Those were the allegations. But on the other hand, you can't really blame the sheriff's deputies, because they were just acting on the warrant, right? I mean, what's your feeling on that? Like, making fun of the sheriffs?
Well, I think you sent me the ACLU amicus brief on it.
Yeah.
I think there's the level of this that, of course, it's free speech, because these are state actors, these are government officials, so it's fair game. Yes, there is a part of it. It's like, guys just doing their job, men and women just doing their job. They're executing a search. Most of the guys involved in this didn't make the decision on going forward with any of that, as somebody else above them did that. But yet, we're all still held accountable for how we conduct ourselves. You have stuff like where I guess it was the sheriff, he looks at that cake and he's sniffing the cake, and it's like, you're on camera, body
Actually,
cam.
yeah, that's true. They had body cams, but I don't think they realized until later that he had home security cameras also, because they did something to his security camera later. And I think they shot the bird at it too.
Yeah, there was that one episode, but it kind of reminds me of just textbook of what not to do. In Tallahassee, we had the Sims murder in 1966, and the deputies go in there and they make coffee on the victim's stove in the scene of a murder house. They make coffee, and the sheriff is like, well, let's put on some coffee, boys. We're going to be here a while. And he's got his foot up on the cushion of the seat, and It was Saturday night, so I think he had a little bit to drink, so he put his hand on the palm of the victim's car to steady himself. So it's like everything that could kind of go wrong, you're hit with it because it becomes then evidence in a case and public record, and now even more so because it's on video.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, number one, they were kind of heavy-handed in this, the way they kicked the door in and things like that. So it's kind of like a lot of it is, it's harsh what the job they're doing. It's almost like they're held to perfection. So I totally sympathize with the deputies and the officers in this case, because it's like you're held to such scrutiny and perfection that, almost to the point of even surgeons aren't held to that kind of a standard. But yet you're kind of setting yourself up because you're going in there and acting like this is the first case you're on, and you're so excited because you got some lemon pound cake in there, and
like digging through his CDs and shooting birds at the security camera and cutting something, and
and just kind of destroying it and scaring his kids. And it turns out the whole thing is wrong to begin with. Now, if they'd done all that and they rescued somebody in a kidnapping, then fine. I'd give the officers the benefit of the doubt, but I think it's just kind of a heavy-handedness, and maybe that factors in a little bit to why the case went the way it did. I think the jury thought that the officers were heavy-handed and unprofessional. And, you look at other cases where I think officers they have discretion about what they're going to do and what they're going to search and how they do that. And some people really feel like recent years there have been really egregious treatment of law enforcement to citizens. Look at the Roger Stone example, where they go there like at 3:00 in the morning with SWAT team type tactics. And whether you like him or not, he's 70 something years old. They could have called his lawyer and say, hey, have your guy turn himself in Monday morning. Or the Mar-a-Lago thing. Some people, regardless of the side of the aisle that you're on, they go in there and they even go through the former first lady's, bureau drawers and lingerie and whatever else. And it's just like, some people look at that and they look at a case like this where the guy's a rapper, he's got a certain persona, and then you're going to go there, you're going to break his door down and terrify his wife, his two small kids, and you're going to behave this way, and then not even come up with the goods in the process. And I think the jury saw it that way. And then you look at part of it, why the jury would have gone the way they did. These guys are kind of like, they're supposed to be tough officers, but they're kind of being crybabies about
their hurt feelings and people making fun of them and calling them and making up names, sending them pound cakes.
So, I mean, it's one, I really have some mixed, I'm really torn about it, because I generally want to give law enforcement the benefit of the doubt. And, we certainly want to have a climate. I want to teach my kids to respect law enforcement, but they also need to respect the uniform that they put on, and, treat people as a citizen and not automatically treat them as a criminal. And conduct yourself like the camera is on you. And I used to tell my clients, when you send that text messages to your ex-wife, just realize you're courtesy copying the judge, and that's how you ought to conduct yourself. I have real mixed feelings about this, because part of this, apparently, he was saying things insinuating some of them were pedophiles, or insinuating he was sleeping with one of their wives. And, made comments about their kids. And I think there is something that's, maybe beyond the pale, or ought to be, in that. I mean, I think it's fair game. Case law is clear. They can criticize and make fun of the officer, call them anything you want to call them, But to me, I think it's beyond the pale to start talking about pedophile or, things about their wife where you don't have any proof of that. But the jury obviously didn't think that was enough to be defamation or to render a verdict on the other. I think there were 3 counts that made it past the motion to dismiss that ultimately the jury heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's play a little bit of this. We'll get your reaction, and then maybe we'll just not worry about the Richens case because there's just too much to talk about, and I have to talk to a client soon. So yeah. Okay. So let's play those thanks to Loophole Lawyer. So please subscribe to his channel.
You're behind the riot shield. Yes. And you're flipping off the security camera.
Said my wife is cheating on me with Mr. Foreman.
But we all know that's not true, correct?
I don't know.
You're claiming that is the defamation statement is that he said he had sex with your wife.
Mr. Walters does have sex with Mr. Foreman does.
Your wife having sex with Mr. Foreman have affected you or your reputation?
It's happening today. My kids came home yesterday because of new post.
Your Honor, I'm going to renew this objection again.
Where in the world is it okay to make something up for fun that's damaging the others when you know for sure it's an absolute lie?
I'm Randy Walters.
How are you currently employed?
I'm a sergeant with the Adelsons Sheriff's Office.
Your wife and children?
A wife, 4 daughters, and 2 little boys.
That's Randy Walters, another cop that's making a claim for defamation against Afroman. Let's watch.
So 6 kids altogether. Are all of those your own kids?
Nah, 2 of them I kidnapped the other day.
For the mixed bag, I have 3 biological kids and 3 children that I adopted through foster care.
While it is a noble thing to adopt children, you should refer to all of them as yours.
What are the ages of your children?
My little boy, who's biological, is 10 years old. My next daughter is 14 years old, who's adopted. And I have a 17-year-old that's adopted, an 18-year-old that's adopted. My 22-year-old son is biologically mine, and my oldest daughter, who's 26, is mine.
The race of your adopted kids?
2 of my adopted daughters are biracial Hispanic, and my youngest adopted daughter is biracial African American.
Bragger.
You took part in this search of Mr. Foreman's home back in 2022, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Can we look at Exhibit 27, please? All right, so let's just play it and see what happens. Thank you.
Randy Walters, private eye. I just look his wife, doggy style.
I'm just trying to figure out the most efficient way to do this. Can you bring up Exhibit 28 and just show us?
Randy Walters, private eye. I just look his wife, doggy style.
We know that the cop's attorney is not the best with technology, but he kept playing over and over the Afroman video for which he proclaimed he was having sex with this cop's wife.
And is there any indication of a date that you can see?
Not with the words it's covering up now.
We'll have to figure out how to do that because it'll be doable. Can we
Go October 4th, 2022.
You find it?
Yeah, when it was October, it says down below it, October 24th, 2022.
You have to play the whole thing again, so let's don't do that.
It didn't go away this time.
Let's see if it'll go. There we go.
October 4th, 2022, 512.
Randy Walters is the son of a bitch. That's why I want his wife ain't got filthy rich.
How did you?
Okay. Well, I see that you managed to withhold your laughter while watching that.
Well, I probably would have laughed more, but I've seen that like 2 or 3 times. So it's, not quite the impact, but the part about, no, I kidnapped those kids the other day. That was pretty good, but it's just a case they never should have brought. I think, you just kind of wish attorneys would have sat them down and said, certain amount of this comes with the job. And, you could do a cease and desist letter or something if he's persisting with insinuating pedophilia and type things like that. But, I've tried to think about this on just different perspectives. And I feel like the free speech angle to this is so significant. And, free speech doesn't protect, the First Amendment doesn't protect nice speech. It protects ugly things. And I think if you go back to ancient Greece, like, Thebes or Athens, the debate could get very sharp, could get very nasty in their politics. And I was just reading a book by Victor Davis Hanson, The Death of Sparta, and their debates that he talks about. I mean, and then in our tradition, Abraham Lincoln was just savaged by his own press in the North, even by Republican-leaning newspapers. And that was his own side. We're not even talking about the South and their treatment of Mr. Lincoln. In Britain, mockery satire, ridicule has always been a part of political speech. So you're fair game as a sheriff, as a chief police, individual officers. I mean, and this is not the first time body cam or surveillance has come out from a traffic stop or something like that, and people, talk about it on social media. Britain, they've always valued wit in their speech, and I think some of the stuff that Afroman does is creative. It's witty. It's entertaining. I think there are certain things that shouldn't cross lines. I feel like I don't think you should, talk about the wives or kids of your opponents or your adversaries or implicate anything sexual like that. But I think it's protected speech by and large what he's done. And it's just an interesting case. I mean, it's one of those cases that he's kind of larger than life. His appearance, the suit that he wore in the closing arguments with the flags on it, and
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious, but it draws attention. So that's my whole thing about this case. These plaintiffs, the people with the hurt feelings, ultimately they drew tons and tons more attention to themselves by filing a lawsuit. So they kind of deserve it because they're trying to get money from Afroman after tearing apart his home and stuff. But they couldn't take a joke, because I do have to admit I've laughed so much watching his videos on his channel. It's just hilarious how he turned his home security videos into this musical sensation.
Yeah, the lemon pound cake song. I mean, it's very creative and very, very funny. And that's exactly what I would have told these clients if they'd come in and said, we want to file a suit against this guy. I'm like, do you really want to air this all out there? And it's not something I would encourage a client to do. And I think as the ACLU brief was very good in terms of just the really high threshold you have to get past for a public official to be defamed. And part of their suit was unlawful use of their likeness. So these guys aren't professional athletes. What financial value is their likeness and their image? And I think the court made some pretrial rulings that were correct on that. And these guys weren't Heisman, in the running for the Heisman or something, that they had all this money to be made from their public appearance persona. They had no public persona absent, Afroman making the videos of them. So,
well, let me ask you this. So if the cops or the sheriff's deputies damage someone's property, then does that person get any sort of restitution?
They can sue civilly for that.
For like a groundless search? I mean, there was a warrant for it though, but it makes you feel bad for people who didn't commit a crime, but their stuff got damaged.
And these are state actors with sovereign immunity, so there's a lot of hurdles to that. But you can make a claim for damaged property, but I don't know how easy that would be to
prevail. I guess it depends on state law, because that's in Ohio. But he did say that originally he just wanted them to repair his door and his gate because, tons of mosquitoes and bugs kept coming into his house because the whole door was torn off. And so that really made him mad. And I think at the time of his deposition, he said he had made back like $24,000, which I don't think covered the cost of repairing the stuff. But hopefully by now, I'm sure he's made a lot more because of the publicity.
you know, and I say good for him. You know, if somebody is subjected to a wrongful search, oftentimes they really do tear up your place. And I say that as somebody, you know, I was a former prosecutor, former auxiliary law enforcement officer. I really want to give the benefit of the doubt to officers most of the time, but you know, there have been certain cases that, you know, the Roger Stone situation, I think, is one where they go in there and they just tear apart the house. And you know, what does that do to your reputation, your image? Your home is violated, and you know, and I think in this situation here, I bet they wish they had just repaired that door and went to Home Depot and, you know, and made things
Yeah.
right. You know, and I think that's public integrity. And I think you can, a little bit of a mea culpa, a little bit of humility will go a long way to say, hey, you know, we had evidence that, you know, there's evidence of kidnapping and related issue here or drugs, and it turned out not to be so, but let's fix your door. Let's make this right. And, you know, you
Mhm.
win more friends potentially. Now, a lot of people just kind of look at this agency as Keystone Cops. And,
Mhm.
you know, this is in Southern Ohio, but it's not unique really to the area. That I think there, some people, the badge goes to their head and they feel like there's no consequence. And some people, as a prosecutor, that title goes to their head, and they think they can just kind of, you know, really treat people with a heavy hand is the best way I can describe it. But I'm glad
Mhm.
he's kind of made some money off of it, and you know, maybe
Yeah, totally.
maybe
Yeah.
turn.
Okay. Well, one last Adelson question, and then I do have to run because I'm supposed to talk with a client and my voice is dying as usual. But this is Leslie B. She has a great channel. She would love to hear your thoughts on Charlie and Donna, and how often do you see a co-conspirator never indicted?
Um, I mean, there've been a number of prominent examples where they are indicted, and I'm kind of drawing blanks of some cases that I could maybe mention that you know, were charged. There have been some I know in North Carolina recently and Georgia where they were similar type cases, and the names kind of just escape me at the moment. So most of the time, I'd say if there's evidence that's going to go forward, this is kind of more of an oddity that it's not, and that it's kind of been done in piecemeal. You know, most of the time they go forward. There's certainly other child custody type cases in Alabama and Georgia recently where all the conspirators are charged and brought forward. I know there have been a number of those.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it meant Charlie and Donna, but she really means cease and desist, because apparently Wendy's attorney has sent letters to a few YouTubers, sort
Yeah.
of telling them, you know, to stop making videos about Wendy or things that seem defamatory or derogatory about her. So, any thoughts on that?
That could certainly chill some content, and some people would think twice about it. But I think it's kind of like what we were just talking about with Afroman, though. If you make yourself a public official and you put yourself out there and there's truth about you out there, it's not something where somebody can be sued over it. You know, so people are talking about the probable cause against Wendy, the things she said, you know, what she said in the interview with Isom is out there in the public domain. It's fair to comment on it. What she said in a podcast or what she wrote in a book herself, you know, she put herself out there. It's fair game. So it's kind of like your "me lady doth protest too much," you know, the old line, you know, and it's similar to Corey Richards, you know, where she wrote a book about her grief based on the man that she killed. So she puts herself out there. You know, Wendy put herself out there to some extent, and there are things I think people have to be careful about. You just can't say things that are, you know, from whole cloth, you know, speculative about her. But I think the stuff that's out there that it's factual, we're allowed to talk about that in the media. But I think there are probably some people that may back off because they get a letter like that.
Hmm. Yeah, because most people don't want to get sued, so they'd rather err on the side of caution. But I feel like I've been pretty careful all these years to say that this is my opinion or this is the allegation, this is a rumor, blabby blab, because we are allowed to have some public discourse about these things. It's all in the news. And clearly people are still interested in talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm so sorry, but I do have to run. I'm late calling this person, but thank you so much, Jeremy. It's always great to talk with you, and you have so much experience. So thank you for sharing your time with
Well,
us.
thank you very much. And the time always goes by so fast because you've oriented us to some really interesting things. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's right, John. She didn't write it. She hired someone. Yeah, her attorney to write letters or something to people. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I need to drink something too. So okay, have a good night then.
Take
Great
care.
to
Thank
see
you.
guys. Justice for Dan also. Take care. Thank you.